Yeah, Rogue Invitational 2019. Shout out. I thought it was awesome. Rich Froning did not think it was awesome.
Did he have a crappy team?
I don't think so. Does Rich have crappy teams?
Okay, I'm just gonna pitch some workout ideas for you, and you tell me like good idea, bad idea.
Okay.
There's a high. Let's see. It's a movement that takes lots of coordination. What's one that comes to mind?
Full snatch.
Okay, full snatch, but the participants have to do it blindfolded. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Are you into it?
I think I need more context.
Well, they do one lift successfully, and then we take it down to 80% of that successful lift, and we blindfold them. We guide them to the bar, and we see if they can successfully snatch 80% of their best with one of their senses removed.
80% aggressive.
Is this?
No, only because of the 80%. I think it would be a fun thing to experiment with. Although, I know that like the blindfold thing was popular a couple decades ago as like a proprioceptive thing, and it's funny like how things kind of come back around sometimes. So I think it could be a fine thing to play with. Not at 80% out the gate though.
I forget. See, that
That's
sounds
stout.
so preposterous to me that I forget that people are really doing that. That they're really blindfolding
Straight up.
themselves and exercising.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they still are, but it was, it was a thing. And I think there is an application for like, okay, close your eyes and try to do some balance stuff or whatever. That's fine, but certainly not a state. Let's just say it's not the main course of your training, nor should it be.
Okay, idea number 2. We're doing a obstacle course.
Yes.
But the athlete is they're covered in grease.
A fantastic idea. What could go wrong? I'm probably going to try that this afternoon. Yes.
What are some ideas that you've had that's like, man, this is actually a legitimately great idea, but it's just too hard logistically to pull off? And I want to preface this by, I don't really want to talk about this at all. I just thought it was like a nice warm-up exercise.
Yeah, sure.
I remember conversations you and I had a long time ago about a tug of war, which I was happy to see happen after that, which I thought was a fantastic idea for the affiliate.
Yeah, Rogue Invitational 2019. Shout out.
That's right.
I thought it was awesome. Rich Froning did not
awesome.
think it was awesome.
Did he have a crappy team?
I don't think so. Does Rich have crappy teams? No, I just think he was sour about it because he was convinced that it was only going to be determined by the weight of the team, which is not true. Certainly a factor, but...
Do you remember the World's Strongest Man competition where they had like the big stone and they had to take it one step at a time up the stairs? I still think that. Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of like what you did at the Capitol thing, right?
Was
that
a huge
the inspiration? I've never thought about that.
Oh, bro. Yeah, and the old Power Stairs events. Like there's a great, I think it was 2008 maybe, one of the finals. It was when Mariusz Pudzianowski was on his unbeatable run. And it was this huge set of stairs, and it was a 500-pound power pin. You know what I mean? Like that awkward kind of stand over top of it and kind of pseudo deadlift it every step. And he just dusted the field. And I was like, dude, that's so awesome. And that was a huge inspiration for the Capitol, no question.
You know, what's funny is like, I mean, you and I had those conversations. This was probably 12 or 13 years ago. And now when you fast forward to like the Rogue Invitational, it's like they're doing all that. Like those things where you're like, man, if somebody could just pull this off. And now, by and large, like most of those things have been done, which is cool.
Oh, I think it's great.
It was kind of fun just a hypothetical about it back in the day.
No, man, I get hats off to Bill Henniger and his team for their creativity in some of the modern strongman stuff that they're doing. I love it. Like that Roga coaster that they did last year. Like, what an awesome spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, it's so cool.
Totally. Man, I'm happy to be here with you.
Likewise. Always.
Especially on the eve of your birthday.
Hey-oh, secret's out. Yep. Yep.
Man, there's lots of things I want to jam on and talk about, and my hope is I'll get out of the way and it can just be a refreshingly creative conversation where maybe we figure some things out together. But I don't know about you, but turning 40 was not a midlife crisis, but it was a great opportunity to reflect and to pause and to think about who have I been these last 20 years of my adult life. Is that what I want to keep being? Why have I tried to do those things? Is that serving me well? And, a bunch of questions like that. And I was thinking yesterday that one of the reasons that I enjoy our friendship so much is that I know without a doubt that it'll be something that we'll talk about that I really enjoy, that you're someone of deep substance and I would say originality. And so I posit that to you because I'm curious of your own thoughts, man.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll let you know when I get there. I still got a couple days on this side of 30, so
that's true.
So we'll see.
That's true.
Excuse me. Jeez, maybe I'll learn how to swallow correctly in the post 40 years. One second, sorry. Okay, we're back. Crushing myself so hard there. Knocked my headphone cord out. Yeah, I mean, I think I have been in kind of a slow motion freak out for the past couple years. So, I mean, I think you know that. So, I hope that the next
that was supposed to be our little secret.
Well,
we're just gonna act like everything's cool, man. Everything's fine.
I mean, at the end of the day, it is. But no, I think you're right. I think it is, a time to kind of reflect and think about things. Maybe, I don't know, man, you might give me too much credit for being original and creative and a deep thinker. I don't know. I don't know if I consider myself any of those things, although it would be nice to have those as self-applied adjectives.
Well, let's start here then. Unless you got something, if you got something like some revelation you've had, it's like, wow, I'm seeing things differently.
No, I wouldn't say that, but I will say that I've definitely got better about just letting things go as far as like self-conception is concerned. I think it's easy to, have an idea of who you are, and it's like, what's the best way to describe it? I think there's always, my wife describes it as like the eternal person. So like in our relationship, she describes me as the eternal Adrian. And like, what are those characteristics? And like the rest is just kind of window dressing that you pick up along the way. And I think I've picked up a lot of window dressing.
That's really good.
Yeah. And so learning some of that and being like, okay, I can let go of some of this window dressing because at its core, I know who I am and what I'm about. And some of that other stuff can fall away. Like, for example, like we were talking before we kind of got into a little bit about how I feel really lucky. I get to program the main site for 2 weeks on CrossFit.com, which is cool. And I'm using that as an opportunity to kind of follow along and build a little bit more routine because I've been admittedly kind of hit and miss with my own fitness lately. And like the story that I've got in my head is, I've never been like a top of the heap athlete, but like I've been gritty and I've been, I've been a physical person.
Respectable.
Yeah, exactly. And at its core, like I'm never not going to be a physical person. That's like one of the most important things to me. And so remembering that, it's like, yeah, man, I know what I'm about. I know I'm going to be physical for the rest of my life in some fashion. And no, it doesn't have to look like the glory days when I was 25 and like hyper focused on working out all the time. And that's fine because that was just dressing. And that was the right dressing at that time in my life. It's not the right dressing now, but at the core, it's still the same underlying principle, if that makes sense. So
yeah. I really it's funny that you took that direction because I've been thinking about that as well. That, to answer that question for myself, it feels like the last 20 years I've thought of who I am as like this, say it's a blank canvas at 20. And I've thought like, well, how can I put as much paint on that canvas to, I think, make me feel special. I think that's deep down, if I'm honest, what I'm really going for. And the concept I'm working with now, which I think is part of the, eternal version of yourself, like you said, is to take more of maybe an Eastern view of art, that instead of accumulating more and more paint on the canvas, to think of like this block of jade or marble, where it's the artist's job to chip away at all the parts that aren't the essence of what the thing is. And so I've thought lately, like you said, the eternal version of yourself, like what's really like without the window dressings, like you said, without all the bells and whistles, how can, and this is ultimately the point of thinking through this, how can I be satisfied with just me instead of the clothes I'm wearing and the tattoos I have and the activities that I'm doing and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. That kind of like reductionist, if that's the right term, approach, I think makes a lot of sense at this point in my life. I was trying to look it up while I was also trying to listen to you, so apologies for the split attention. But I can't remember. I want to say it was Hemingway, but I think I might be totally wrong on that. But somebody famous who said something along the lines of like all writing is editing. With the idea is like, hey man, anybody can put a bunch of stuff out there, but to reduce it to the point that it's most impactful is the real magic behind writing. And I think that in my experience is very true for most creative endeavors. It's like, okay, how do you, like, there's always not always, but a lot of times there'll be an additive process for sure. But then once you get it to a point that is built up, it's like, all right, what is kind of superfluous here? What can we get rid of? So yeah, I just can't wait to get to the old man yells at cloud stage of my life. You know what I'm saying? I feel like
you just don't give a shit what anybody.
I feel like
thinks.
No, not even that. It's just just like start ranting about things that nobody else cares about. That's yeah.
I've thought. Have you pictured yourself at like old age? Have you
a little bit? Yeah.
Do you ever think of that?
Yeah.
I've thought that it won't be good for me to be idle, so I'll need to have. And I'm like, endlessly curious about stuff. So I could see that'll never be an issue for me. Like being bored will never be a problem, I don't think. So I've pictured myself at 80 doing something physical. I've projected like, oh, maybe I'm like on ski patrol. I'm the oldest guy, once again, trying to be special. I'm the oldest guy on ski patrol. But I just got a bad attitude, right? So I'm cussing at the people as I'm rescuing their life, like, get back here, you son of a bitch. I'll get you down the mountain. Just every day I'm just angry about helping people.
If you do that, you got to start smoking at like 75.
For sure.
Yeah.
For
cigarette
sure.
hanging out of your mouth.
Cigarette in my mouth.
On the slope. Bad attitude.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't think you need to chain smoke necessarily, but just like a regular, it's like a regular image.
Well, you could argue, like, is he really smoking it, or is it just like, is it just hanging out of the mouth, just like a mechanic? Like, I don't know if he's actually inhaling it, but it's always there.
So, 2 inches of ash on the end of that thing.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I love it.
What about you? Are you nostalgic at all?
Yes. I think everybody is to an extent. I don't know that I'm like super nostalgic, but like, yeah, definitely. I definitely, and I think in less about like specific things or like eras of the world, and more about like who I feel that I was at a certain time. Like I'll be like this, which is kind of like this weird, I get, it's a fake construct, right? Because I look back to like getting back to the physical thing and be like, oh, well, X amount of years ago, I could do Y and Z, and that's who I was. And it's like, well, not really. That's not really who you were. It's like, even if that was true, it's like, man, you were just as fallible at that point. You know what I mean? Like, you had just as many weird hangups at that point. Like, there, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was not utopia then. And so to kind of romanticize it as such is weird. So like, I think I absolutely do. But I'm also aware of it's kind of I don't know, it's a strange thing. Yeah, it's not reality in a lot of ways.
That's a good point, that it's rose-colored glasses and it's yearning for the good, but you forget, like, hey man, you had challenges in that phase of your life too, or that's a really weird thing, just how memory works, where I mean, I'll remember some things that if I'm objective, they were actually kind of shitty at the time too. Like they weren't totally great experiences, but I look back and be like, oh man, those were the days. It's like, no, it wasn't.
Well, I don't think there's
days.
Well, I'll also say, hey man, like, there's not a bad thing to look back on your life and kind of give it the, oh yeah, that was better than it might have been at the time. Like, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. But yeah, I do think it's important to recognize that, it's not always the way you thought. What's that? Like, this is a way tangential, but like, I'm in kind of an armchair way, kind of interested in just the like kind of absurd politics and culture war that is going on in like broadly North America, but kind of the world. And I don't really want to talk about that specifically, but I do think what's an astute analysis for a lot of that right now is that like most people seem to be opining for a time that never existed. You know what I mean? They're like, well, if we just like, and it goes both directions. So if you have somebody who's more conservatively minded, it's like this perpetual 20 years ago that was like, everything was just so much better. You're like, was it? What are you talking about? There was, there was so many issues you would have had with that time at that time. Like if you actually go back and like take a look at what was happening, like, no, you're out of your mind. And then on the other end of that, if you have somebody who's more progressively minded, it's this, if only 10 years from now, X, Y, and Z would happen, we would get there, and it would be, everybody would just live in harmony. And you're like, well, that's absurd too. So it's, It is kind of interesting how the mind wants to do that, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know you're a fan of Russian literature as well, and I feel like that's like a big theme of a lot of those books, the Dostoevsky and the Tolstoy, where it's like, hey, if we could just get here, like right here on the other side is paradise. And I think you can do that looking forward, and you can do it looking back. It's like, oh man, if I could just get back to where I was. But to take it back to what you said earlier, I think the eternal, I've wondered if the eternal person that I'm striving to be, stripped of all the window dressings, is based on things that, I don't know if aptitude is the right word, but things that I find deeply satisfying, which I think go back to even before I was in my 20s, like even as a kid, like thinking back, like using nostalgia not to ruminate or to project as something greater than it actually was, but to remember, to be reminded of those things that I found deeply satisfying before I started giving a shit what people thought, or before this concept. There was a time I can remember where I wasn't trying to be special. I wasn't trying to be unique or original. And I find that lately, at least in the last couple of years, I've been trying to reconnect with those things, which feels more or less like a more eternal, a more stripped down version of myself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I what I think about a lot is, there were big portions of my life where I would find something, and when I would engage with it, like, I don't know, like people talk about flow state and whatever. But the point is that I would lose time. You know what I mean? You get so invested in it. Like when I was younger and I played a lot of music, it was like that, where you just get into whatever, whether you're just practicing something routine or creating something new. Once you kind of got into it, it's like you look up and you're like, holy crap, it's been 2 hours. And throughout my life, there's been several things like that. But as I get older, there's less and less that I allow for that. And that's what I'm trying to get back to. And not necessarily those specific things, because they might not be the right things anymore. But I'm trying to pay attention to myself to be like, okay, what are the things that, like, when I get into them, I'm like, oh, everything else kind of is inconsequential for a minute. And I know, like, that's harder when you become, quote unquote, an adult and you have more adult responsibilities. Like, I think your time becomes more bound necessarily because you have more responsibility, right? Like, that's just the natural order of it. But I at least can convince myself that because of that, it's like, well, I'm a responsible person with responsibilities now. Therefore, those times that I have found something that I kind of let everything else fall away for a few minutes or hour or whatever, I should be careful of that. I should push that away a little bit. I should keep it at arm's length, because that's not what responsible people do, and that's not a good thing. Because at the end of it, it's like, what, your schedule and your routine, and what are you trying to serve with that, if not for those times that you can kind of fall into that state and really enjoy the little things in life. There, young man,
Well,
yeah.
right.
Wait, I have a question for you to pull us out of the depths a little bit. My wife and I debate this all the time. All right. At what point am I old enough that if I run into, like, a young man in my neighborhood, coffee shop, whatever, can I address him as son? Like, son, I don't think that's a good idea. You're telling me about this.
I think yesterday was.
Well,
you should start doing it immediately.
Is it like I have to reach a certain age, or is it like the discrepancy between me and this young man has to be a certain gap? Like, what?
It's just a state.
As a
state
Texan,
of mind, man.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying I'm ready, because Kim says I'm not.
I think you're ready. What's funny is
I appreciate
the opposite paradigm also exists, where, I'm 41, And there's a coach that we have that's 21. So I'm 20 years older than this guy. But in my mind, we're like pretty much the same age. You know, it's like we're like really close.
I do that all the time.
So maybe instead of just assuming that we're contemporaries, I should just start calling him son, which technically he could be. Yeah,
it's true. I forget about that all the time in jiu-jitsu because like we got a pretty good age range at the school I train at. Like we got some guys that are older than me for sure, but we definitely have some younger fellas. I'd say the majority are in their kind of mid-20s, and I forget sometimes. And especially like again, I'm not like in the craziest physical shape, but I do okay. And so like I do okay. I can keep up with most of the younger guys physically if they haven't been physical outside of jiu-jitsu, especially, And so I do forget sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, I got a decade and a half on you, son.
Come here, son.
That's fun to pull.
The place that you should use that.
I do pull that card out sometimes, dude. I mean, I don't know about you, but my buddy Rye, he's a great guy. He instructs at the school that I go to, and he kicks my butt around. But it's nice because we're kind of same weight class, and he's 42, I think, so kind of same weight, same age. And I was asking him the other day, I'm like, dude, how much percentage-wise do you think your enjoyment of jiu-jitsu is shit talk? And like, because I'm leaning on like 80% is probably, like, that's my favorite thing. It's just shit talking people in the middle of a roll, especially when I have no business doing it, Yeah.
This is what I want to talk about. Back to the blindfold thing. You could imagine being blindfolded in jiu-jitsu.
You roll with your eyes open? Dude, half the time I'm just eyes closed praying for the best.
But don't you know that you could be blindfolded and you could tell the age of the person you're rolling with by like their balled up like kinetic energy. I'm pretty sure.
You mean training age or physical age?
Yes.
Training age.
I think training age, but even commensurate to like, hey, I'm 22 and I'm not thinking about tomorrow. Like all I'm thinking about is this right here. Whereas, I don't know about you, it's like I'm not doing anything that's going to keep me from coming in like tomorrow.
100%.
And I feel like you can just feel like that balled up energy and like a really terrible like allocation of like letting your battery drain. And it's at that point where that's really fun, is to let somebody's battery drain, and then you start shit talking them, right? When you feel their bodies collapse. That's when when you're right there in your ear and you're just whispering to them. There's nothing more demoralizing than that.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, it's so fun. Oh, it's the best. It really is.
How did you get into it? I don't even know if I asked that. Was there somebody that was like, hey, you should do this? Was it Jason McDonald, or did you just...
Long story, man. Well, I've been a mixed martial arts fan forever. I mean, I started watching the early UFCs with my dad on VHS, and then I was really into Pride.
Ken Shamrock and Chemo.
Oh, yeah, dude, like all of it. Yep.
Yeah.
All the lore. Like the Mark Coleman days leading into the Pride days, and like late 90s Pride was, I still think, just the best blend of combat sports and spectacle. Love it so much. Anyway, and so like when I was in college, I boxed for like 2 semesters with our little boxing club, and again, I wasn't anything special. It was just fun to do, and that actually was kind of what got me into working out a little bit more seriously, because I came to the realization pretty quickly that I enjoyed the camaraderie. Like the group of guys we trained with was cool. They're all way tougher than me and way more like masculine. I was in the freaking music program. As a scrawny little kid, so it's kind of fun to rub up against that. And the conditioning and the drill work that we used to do, like I loved it. The campus that I went to school at had like 800 stairs or something stupid, and so we were always running those stairs and doing shadow boxing at the top and blah, blah, blah. And I loved that aspect of it. But when it came time to getting punched in the head, I was like, I'm less interested in this. So
I like the idea of it.
Yeah,
I like the
yeah.
idea of it.
Yeah, the training is awesome, but the actual, getting hit in the head thing, I was like, I could take it or leave it. So I did like 2 semesters of that, and then didn't really do anything afterwards. And then when I moved to San Francisco in the early 2000s, I did this is like early days of CrossFit where they're talking about Krav Maga, and I was like, ooh, that's a thing to do, so I did Krav Maga for a couple years, and that was great. Like, I think there's a lot of utility. It gets shit on a little bit, but I think the basics of Krav Maga, I think, are useful if you think you're going to encounter
I like
violence.
the idea of it. I like the idea of Krav
No,
Maga.
I like the basics of it because it's like, okay, hey, man, here's how you can throw a nasty knee to the groin, and here's how you can elbow somebody into oblivion. Those are useful. And I also think that the mindset of if you are going to be attacked and somebody is threatening you, then you need to respond in kind. And even if you lose, it's better than just being a passive victim in many situations, right? And I think that's a mindset that in most people's kind of modern existence does need to be developed to some degree. But once you get past that intro stage and it's like, okay, this dude's coming at you with a knife and this guy's got a grenade, it's like, okay, what are we doing here?
Ding dong, doorbell rings. What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. So did that for a few years. Enjoyed it. Did it with my wife. It was super fun. And then,
Cool.
After it got to a certain stage, it's kind of like, okay, I think I'm good. The human shield stage, I'm like, I think we can move on. So this was like 2004, maybe 2005. And around that same time, I caught wind of this guy who was doing Sambo, just kind of like teaching amateur Sambo. And he was a carpenter by trade. He had a wood shop, and it was like me and a collection of like half a dozen dudes would go up in the evenings. We would move, like, no shit. We'd be in his like carpentry shop. We would move the saws and the drill presses and this like out of the way. We would lay down some zebra mats, and then we'd throw each other around. And it was pretty unstructured. He knew what he was doing, but it wasn't like he was an instructor full time. And at that period, it's like you didn't have the kind of proliferation of the internet and, people trading a lot of training methods as much and as freely as now. And so you could kind of take what you got. So shout out Serge Gerlach, who, great guy.
That was his name?
Yeah.
Serge,
yep.
That's hard to beat.
Yeah, so I did Sambo for about a year and a half. And then I started traveling hardcore for CrossFit. And so that hobby kind of fell to the wayside because I was literally on the road from 2008 until about 2018. I was on the road 3 out of 7 days a week for 45 weeks out of the year, something like that.
Yeah, not an exaggeration. When we say hardcore.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was all in, and dude, it was an amazing period of my life. Like it was awesome, and it was exactly what I wanted to be doing. But I mean, that comes at a time cost, right? Like you're not exactly consistent with a lot else. So didn't do anything in that realm. So that was 2008 that I stopped doing Sambo. I think 2007 or 2008. Didn't do anything, but I always had kind of a dabbling interest in it. Fast forward to 2019, and at the office in Scotts Valley, CrossFit office, Garth Taylor had been teaching free lunchtime classes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's a big cadre of people that were doing it at lunch, and I started going to that office more and more regularly, and I was like, dude, what a great opportunity. I mean, Garth's a legend. This is no expense to me. It's happening anyway. It's something I've been interested in. Like, okay. So I just started doing the lunchtime session there when I was in that office. And I was living in Oakland, California at the time. And so I got the bug enough that I was like, I got to find a local place to train because I'm not in the office often enough to be consistent in the way that I want to be. So signed up for a school in Oakland under old school Brazilian master Eduardo Rocha, who is the man. Still competes as a masters competitor and does really, really well. Very, very kind of old school. Like he's a Hoyler Gracie black belt. Got his black belt in who knows 96. I don't know. Yeah. He's.
Wow.
I think Eduardo's late 50s now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so fun to learn from him because he's very old school, very simple, very like, why would you want to learn? Like, okay, yeah, you need an awareness of these modern techniques and the modern styles, sure. But let's be honest, what are you going to remember when it comes down to it? Simple, pressure heavy, capitalize
doing
on.
donkey guard in the streets, huh?
No, yeah. Not in Eduardo's world. But, and it was great. It was a very old school mentality too, where, dude, his gym was not huge. It was like pretty standoffish that I think could turn a lot of people away. But I loved it. I was like, dude, this is great. Like, as a white belt there, I don't think the dudes knew my name for like the first 8 months that I trained there. Because they're like, this guy's like anybody, right? Like, hey, he's probably not coming back. But I loved it. So, yeah. So then when we moved here, serendipitously, we got an apartment and just to kind of get the lay of the land before we found a more permanent place to live. Mm-hmm. And serendipitously, there was a jiu-jitsu school across the street from the apartment that we just happened to get. Like, did not plan it at all. So it was awesome. So now I train there.
Two things. One, I also really enjoyed the first couple of years of anonymity where I wasn't supposed to know anything, and also they didn't know anything about me. So let's be honest, like when you got back into it, you were a black belt in CrossFit. You were seen as,
maybe that's a stretch, but I appreciate it.
Not as a practitioner per se, but definitely as an instructor, definitely as somebody that had traveled the world. And it was so nice to strip that away and just be a student. And
for sure.
I remember being really bummed when people finally found out that I was involved in fitness, because then it was like they saw me in a different light, or they thought I was supposed to know something more or have a deeper understanding. Like, as an example, once the instructor found that out, he would be teaching and then he'd turn to me and say, "That's how the shoulder works, right?" And I want to be like, I mean, yeah, but like, don't include me in this. Like, I just want to watch.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I definitely get the being a beginner thing has been so fun. Jesus, sorry. One more time. And I'm 4 years deep now, I guess. Had a year off for COVID, which was lame, but regardless, certainly not a beginner anymore. But I'm not hot shit either. Not trying to be. But I still very much treat it as, I'm just there to learn. Like, I don't need to be the best. I don't even care about that, like, truly. And it's not to say, like, I have frustrating days in the gym. And, dude, everybody's got a bit of an ego when it's like, man, I got caught in something stupid by some guy that I shouldn't have gotten caught by. You know what I mean? Like, that happens and you get frustrated, whatever. But but as a rule of thumb, it's like, I don't know. I and maybe this is a little big-headed of me, but I try to treat it as like an example for some of the younger hot-headed guys that come up, that it's like, okay, sure, you can beat me some of the time, and that's fine, because I'm not training to win. I'm training to get better at things that I'm not good at. And then, it's kind of like the big dog thing. Like, I just have a new puppy, and you see it happen where it's like, they go back and forth, but then the puppy gets a little out of line, and you're like, okay, check you a little bit just to let you know. You know what I mean? And then we can get back to like, you can win, and it's fine, and I don't care, like, most of the time. Maybe that story suggests that I do care, but you know what I'm saying.
No, I know what you're saying. There's a there's a young man in the gym that is starting down his journey of jiu-jitsu, and he was like, "Hey man, can I talk to you? I'm really frustrated." And he explained that the instructor there, the professor, was really upset with him that he wasn't coming more, that he wasn't showing that he had learned some of the techniques. And, my advice to him was like, it's all good, man. Like, you know, like, do jujitsu and enjoy it, but don't say I am, like I am jujitsu, or it's like this is who I am. It's like, to do this long term, I think you have to have the perspective that you just had. You can't get upset every time that you do poorly, because that's going to happen like 70 to 80% of the time. I feel
and that's just it too. Like with jiu-jitsu in particular, like I love it. It's so fun. I just have a blast. Like win or lose, I really, it's fun either way.
Mm-hmm.
And getting back to what we were talking about, like the eternal self. I know what I'm about, and I want to be doing this for the rest of my life in some capacity. And it kind of takes the edge off, because I'm like, yeah, a great example, man. We had the CrossFit Games recently. I had a bunch of travel before that. So I was away from the jiu-jitsu gym for probably 7 weeks, maybe 6-7 weeks. And, in my younger days when I was really kind of hard charging about being more disciplined and routine, and not that those are bad things, but I would have kind of beat myself up about, oh man, that's a long time to be away. But now I'm like, no, man, I'll get back to it, and because I love it and it's fun. Like, why do I need this pressure on myself? Like, there's no goal in a time sense. I have a loose goal, like I want to have a black belt by 50. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
So, I think I'm on track for that. So it's but beyond that, I'm like, yeah, dude, I just want to keep doing it. And so it does kind of take the edge off some of those weird self-imposed, like I have to be showing up X amount of times a week. I'm like, no, dude, I'll get back to that because I like to do it, not because I need some sort of self-flagellation to get there.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because I think when I first started, it was like, oh man, I wonder how fast I could get a black belt. And then the longer you do it, it's like it would be cool if I just got it like eventually. And then how I feel today is like, well, it'd be cool that I would stay a belt until it was like obnoxiously obvious that I
For
should.
sure.
It's like it's insulting.
Totally.
It's like, hey man, we need
What
to
are you
have an
doing here?
intervention with you because you're not supposed to be this anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like it's almost turned that timetable on its head.
Yep.
I didn't know that did you know that you mentioned music in high school. Is it high school or college?
Both. Yeah.
Have we talked about that? Did you know that I was not heavily involved in, when I say not heavily involved in high school with sports, it meant that I didn't really do anything, but I was really into music.
I feel like we must have talked about this at some point.
Probably a decade ago.
Wait, you play saxophone? Is that bubbling up? Am I totally wrong?
Oh, I played trumpet.
Oh,
and
and
then
drums.
I quickly transitioned over to drums.
Yeah. Okay. I knew about the drum thing.
And we had a great band instructor that was also like a concert jazz trumpet player. Anyway, so that was like a really cool. Oh wow, yeah, that was like a really cool
Yeah,
season.
Mr. Wassmer.
Yeah, Mr. Skelton was his name. Shout out to Mr. Skelton. He's probably dead. All right. Let's talk about curiosity. What's something that you're curious about, and I think a good definition of curiosity is there's a gap in jiu-jitsu aside, because that could probably eternally fall into this category, but jiu-jitsu aside, there's a gap in your knowledge about something, but there's an emotional and cognitive interest in closing that gap. What is it for you?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I figured myself out that well. Like I don't know if that's what motivates me, is closing that gap, to be honest. Like it's yeah, I don't know, man.
When you were
I'm not
talking
really
earlier,
I'm not really like goal driven in that way, I guess.
not even for the sake of a goal, but when you were talking about, times where you forget of yourself and you're immersed in something, it's like, whoa, okay, I didn't realize like how much time had gone by. I feel like so many people are talking about ways to allocate your time, and hey, make sure you're going on walks and you're seeing the sunshine. But for me, like that thing where I have uninterrupted time to just rabbit hole down something feels like a great balance to the stress that's induced in normal life. So is there something, as I say that, is conjured up for you, or still on the search for what that may be next? Because you've had lots of interests and you've had lots of things that you have been curious about, I'd say, over the years.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I feel like the last couple years in particular, I've really self-regulated in a not good way around that. Like I've really, again, like going back to what we talked about a little earlier, like, oh, okay, I'm a responsible adult with more forward-facing responsibilities. I need to really, be this or be that, and some of these other things shouldn't be happening because that's not what a responsible adult does. And so more than any specific thing, I've just been really trying to get back to, if I have something that I'm interested in or an idea around what I want to do with, the free time that I do have, I just do it. Because what I would find myself being in the bad habit of is trying to project it to its ultimate end state, and then using that as an excuse to be like, well, that's a lot of work to get to a point where, it's this, that, and the other. And so I'm just not going to start today with it, instead of just enjoying the act. So like a great example, I started, this is really nerdy and I'm almost hesitant to put it out in the world, but here we go. I started a YouTube channel because I've been doing a lot of land clearing lately, and it's all
awesome.
It's all POV, heavy duty brush cutting and like long form stuff like that. Boring, weird, like drone experimental stuff. And in my head, the grandiosity of it was like, I'm going to film this stuff. The high concept of it is I'm also going to use it as an excuse to get back into like building my own electronic music devices, like homemade synth, and then creating like synth wash edits of these long form blah, 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 blah. And I started convincing myself in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, that's all the work to do this manual labor, figure out how to edit it, figure out how to build these, figure out how to build these, these electronic relays, compose some stuff, record that, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, it's never going to happen. And so for a while I stopped, or didn't start, I guess is a better way to say it. But recently I've been like, no, like, screw it. It doesn't need to be anything. And so, yeah, I'll take the video and I'll throw it up there with a title, and maybe I'll clip the ends, and like, that's enough for now. And I'm like, yeah, okay, with enough consistency, maybe it'll build into something more, or maybe not. But it seemed like it was something I wanted to do, and so I'm doing it. And that's it. That's all it needs to be. Yeah.
I love that. I imagine you're a fan of DIY. I mean, basically what you said, there's a lot of that. It's like, figuring out how to do, multiple disciplines and then try to put them together. It's a great example of what I was hoping we'd talk about, where, a style of creativity, I think sometimes we put this pressure on ourselves to do something really original. But what you just said is like, it's combinational. It's taking all of these things that, I mean, one, I'm sure there's a problem that needs to be solved. Like one, there's like brush that needs to be cleared out on your land
endlessly.
But then, you know, it's like, oh man, how can I bring my love of, you know, music and then, you know, DIY like together in a way that's not for, you're not doing it for any other reason except it's just something that you want to do. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I've been trying to do that, and it's funny, like even the work itself, you know, on the property out there, like, man, I it has been so fun to just go out there. There's like endless things to do, endless projects, and to go out there for a couple hours after work and not have an agenda and be like, okay, well, these 50 things need to get done. I'm just going to pick the one that seems fun right now. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll run my chainsaw for a little bit, or, oh, you know what? Nope. Today's like heavy duty brush cutting. Let's go. Or, today's I'm going to ride to do like a top cut on the zero turn, you know, whatever it is. It's just fun to have a, just kind of it's non-directed, and it's just like whatever it feels like the thing to do, and just trying to build that muscle up again of, okay, when I do have a little bit of time, what is it that I want to do? I'm going to do that thing instead of trying to rationalize what I should be doing, because that just doesn't seem to be a good end.
Man, that's almost like good advice to take.
I don't know about advice. I don't know if I'm one to dole out advice, but
a good heuristic, a good rule of thumb, something to consider and something to remember. As far as fitness goes, man, you feel like there's still things to explore there as far as all the roles and responsibilities that you've had? Like, do you feel still stimulated to create there, or is that something where it's like, you know, that's my job, like I'll go and I'll do that, but I'm always looking for other things to kind of find that, like you said, that stimulation, or, you know, something to do just for the sake of doing it?
No, I mean, I still very much think that that's, you know, like I love that. But I don't want it to be everything at the same time. And I think for a long time it was. And at a certain point, it's like, I think it's a very rare personality type that's like, well, that's my one thing, and I'm just going to like Bushido my way through life with this one thing. You're like, cool. Most people don't do that. You know what I mean? Like that whole, what was that movie that came out a while ago, Jiro Dreams of Sushi? And everybody's hyping it up. And I'm like, yeah, it's great for what it was, and it's cool. You know, this master of his craft, and that's all he's done, and that's all he's ever wanted to do. I'm like, that's awesome. I don't think it's a model for most people. And it's funny, like people watch something like that and they're like, oh, like that's just, they romanticize it, right? And they try to apply it to themselves. They're like, well, if only I could just, you know, chop wood and carry water, as they say, all day, every day. You're like, no, you would hate it. Trust me, it's not for you. And it's okay that it's not for you. So to get back to the root of the question, yeah, I'm very much like, you know, I still love it. I just think it's going to be a little different in the form it takes. I like getting, again, kind of coming full circle. I feel these days it's more like a reductive approach to getting back to basics. I think we have gone through a cycle in the broader fitness landscape where I really believe CrossFit kind of at its heart in the early days was a cutting away of some of the bloat of the fitness industry and what it had become. And I believe now that cycle has come all the way around again. And there's just so much stuff that's even within the greater CrossFit ecosystem. It's cool that it's grown. It's cool that there's so much kind of cross-pollination. But with that, and with that kind of mainstream appeal, there's a lot of that bloat that comes creeping back in. You know, like so many people believe that you need all these extraneous pieces of support gear or supplements or whatever, and they're right back in this phase of neglecting the basics at the at the expense of, or what should I say? They're emphasizing the minutia at the expense of the fundamentals. Again, I feel broadly. And so I think that's a role for some of us that have been in the game a longer time now. It's less a creative element and like, how far can we push this thing? Because there's plenty of people doing that. And more of a like, hey, you know what? Some of this stuff doesn't need to be pushed. It can be simple. And no, just because, you know, you aren't aware that this conversation has already been had and it doesn't need to be a part of what you're doing on a regular basis, doesn't mean that all of a sudden it needs to find its way back in, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Man,
and I guess trying to do that in a way that's not dogmatic. Because at the end of the day, it's like, hey, man, there's many ways to the top of the hill. But there's also a lot of meandering paths that like you don't have to go down, and they've already been trodden by many people, and you know, you don't have to do it.
Yeah, man, I like a lot of what you said. That you know, a good definition of radical is to get back to the roots, and the roots is not to turn back the hands of time and to disregard all of the iterations and evolutions, but it's just to strip it down and be like, hey, what's really essential? And I think it's always going to be our tendency to try to over-engineer something when, like you said, that combination and the essence of that in those early days, and you know, the nostalgia of that didn't mean that it was perfect, but it is. I think as we talk about like this fleeting construct of time, I don't want to make it any more complicated than it needs to be. It's important to me. I want to keep doing it. It's what I've devoted, you know, my vocation to, at least. But yeah, I couldn't agree more that like all the bells and whistles that are dangling from this thing, and then I'll say like the art though is how to communicate that without being cynical or without being judgmental or, you know, without even being combative in a way. 'Cause it's not even, like you said, it's not this or that. It's just like, it's all good. This is just, this is at some point after you've been doing it for 20 years, it's what's going to happen anyways. Yeah.
That's one thing that I'll say. And I'm sorry, man, I got to wrap it up pretty quick here. But
okay.
That's one thing I'll say that I'm getting less and less tolerant of in my old age, soon to be old age, perpetual state of soon to be old age. One thing I'm getting less and less tolerant of broadly, and then in myself, is exactly what you just said, like a cynicism or a condescension. I just think it's so cheap. And lazy in most cases. And so like, and hey man, I'm not saying I'm flawless there. Like I'll catch myself falling into that mode occasionally. And like, I just try to, that's one thing I really try to like root out of myself is like, dude, there's so many cool things in the world. And we live in such an interesting time where you really have such freedom to pursue any niche interest, more so than any other point in human history. I mean, like, you know, if you have the craziest, you know, exotic turtle collection, you can find a community of people that also share that love. Where even
people out there,
even 20 years ago, that would have been next to impossible. So it's a pretty cool thing. And I just think that that cynicism is one of those things that it just begets itself, and people really want to, people in that mindset just really want to pull you into that mindset, and it's just a dead end path, in my opinion. It's no good. So
totally.
Yeah.
I feel like that's great advice for maybe the next generation of coaches, would you say? I mean, those that are, you know, we have 20 years of backlog with this, but now, you know, someone that's hearing this conversation and they're just starting down this journey. Is there any other, before we sign off, any other advice that you would have for someone like that?
Oh man, advice is always such a weird thing to me, but if I'm going to speak broadly about it, I think it is give yourself the opportunity to make mistakes and be bold in the way that you're putting things out there. Even if you come back and change your mind on them later, don't be timid about your stance on certain things. It doesn't mean you need to be combative. It doesn't mean that you need to be a dick about it. But, take a stand on the things that you believe in the fitness realm, and then try to direct people in the best possible way that you can around that. And then don't be afraid to come back and at some point reevaluate and say, like, okay, I still agree with that. Or, you know what, actually, I think I got it wrong. I know I was pretty headstrong about it, but like, yeah, this is a better path. And I know that now because I'm more experienced. And the only way you can do that is by allowing yourself to make mistakes, but still moving forward confidently. If you're too hesitant around that sort of thing, people they're not going to be able to be led by you. So you have to have that, even if you come back and reevaluate.
Pretty good words there for somebody that doesn't want to give advice. That's pretty good.
Old man yells at cloud.
Man, we'll wrap it there. I appreciate you.
My pleasure, man.
Man, thank you for your friendship. I got notes
likewise.
that we could probably have 10 more conversations
Well,
around
I'll
here.
put
So
you on
let's
the
do it
spot.
again.
I was going to say, can I come back sometime? It'll be fun.
Yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes.
Okay. Well, I dig it.
Happy birthday, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And I also appreciate this yellow on yellow that you've got going on there with the ring, the glasses, and the shirt.
Thank you.
It was not lost on
Thanks
me.
for
So
noticing, dude.
yeah, of course.
Thanks for noticing.
All right, man. It's great to see you, and I will talk to you soon, I hope.